All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've all been waiting for, Beth Kanter.
Big thank you to Cindy for that great introduction. And I was really intimidated having to follow Jeff Forrester, because I know his reputation for creativity and musical numbers is international. And so I was quaking in my boots, and since I really can't sing, and I wouldn't subject any of you to that, I can dance. And also, all of you are going to dance with us, okay? So we have an instructional video, and I've carefully researched what dance would be native to Pittsburgh, and I was told that I had a good chance that this one would be, and that you'd all know it. So you all need to get up. And I also am putting Jeff on the spot because we're going to demo it. Should we demo it on the stage? All right. All right, we can go.
Everybody up, come on. Burn off those lunch calories. Yeah. Okay, you ready? Go.
Thanks for being with us for the show this week. Now here's Bobby and the kids to show you one of the most popular dances in America, the chicken dance.
Use the chicken dance when he plays fairs and the Worst Fest in New Braunfels, Texas. Here's how to do it. Everybody stand up at home and join us. You make the beaks, wings, tail feathers, and 4 claps. Do that again. Beaks, wings, tail feathers, and 4 claps. Next, you lift elbows and turn in a circle. This. Or lean back and turn. Never did that in a wedding. Turn the legs by yourself.
That was great. Let's make sure it's still working. All right, I have to remember that after I do that I'm going to be a little short of breath. Well, and part of the reason, actually, is I'm very interested in movement and how it affects your brain. And if you look at a brain scan of a brain that's been sitting for 20 minutes, it's completely dark. And if you see a brain that's been walking and moving for a few minutes, it's all lit up. So there was a dual purpose, sort of work off that chocolate cake and also brains on. So can everyone hear me? It's working. Okay, is that better? Great. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about 3 things: how to be networked, how to use measurement, and how to learn from your data. Ideas that are in both of my books, The Network Nonprofit and Measuring the Network Nonprofit. So that's a little bit about me. And I have been working in the nonprofit sector about 35 years. And about 22 years ago, I discovered the internet. I didn't invent it. And I got my first job as an online network trainer for an online network of artists called ArtsWire. And when I interviewed for the job, I said, I don't know a modem from a microwave, but I know how to learn, and I know how to transfer that learning. And I've sort of have made a career of that, literally working with NGOs literally around the world. And so, and I've written the 2 books, and I thought last year when my book won, the green one there, won the Terry McAdams Nonprofit Book Award, I thought I had reached the top of my career. But little did I know that Conan O'Brien was talking about me on his program. And we're going to just look at the clip and pray that it works, right?
Pray that it works. It will.
I have a lot of followers. I have followers on Twitter, Facebook, Google Plus, and YouTube, okay? But there's one piece missing from my social media empire. I'm talking about LinkedIn, okay? Well, I'll be honest with you, I don't know what LinkedIn is.
Yeah, I don't either.
I have no idea. I asked around. It has something to do with business,
Right.
I think, okay? But when I found out that I didn't have a presence on LinkedIn, I was outraged. I was freaked out. I want to rule LinkedIn. I want to be the king of LinkedIn, even if I don't know what it all's right.
You don't have to know in order to rule it.
Exactly. Exactly. So what I did is I created a LinkedIn profile, okay? There I am, I'm dressed to go clubbing in Germany. All ready to go. And then I noticed that other people on LinkedIn, other business leaders, they post pictures of themselves sometimes with a world leader to sort of up their ante, make themselves seem more important. For example, the founder of Craigslist, Craig Newmark, posted a profile photo of himself with President Obama. Okay? Big deal. Here's what I did. I put up something even better. This is a picture of me with former presidents Bill Clinton, George Bush, and Teddy Roosevelt. And check this out. We're all standing in the palm of Pope Francis. True story, kids. So far, I've amassed over 75,000 followers, and I've now been deemed something, this is real, called a LinkedIn influencer. That's right. Just the other day, I passed GE Chairman Jeff Immelt. He was my old boss at NBC. So we're on our way to the top. But I deserve more followers, and I will have them, I will. Look at some of the people with more followers than I, okay? Check it out. This guy, David Evans, has almost 80,000 followers. He calls himself Cisco's chief futurist. I'm sorry, I thought my job was bullshit. What the hell? What's a futurist?
I don't know.
Do you know what a futurist is?
No idea.
Yeah, I'm a futurist. Do you know the future? No. Yeah, and when does this woman, Beth Kanter, she has over 125,000 followers. That's right, she's wearing a hat she borrowed from Macho Man Randy Savage. And she has more followers than I do. It's absurd. Well, guess what? Me and the presidents can wear gaudy red hats too. There we
Great. So, and I had to look up who Macho Man Randy Savage was. I had no idea who he was, but he's a wrestler. Anyway, so anyway, by the way, I would have worn my red hat, but it had a horrible accident on one of my trips of late, and I need to replace it. But but it's, it's not about the red hats. He thought the secret to my success was wearing a red hat and to get that number of followers. And it's not about the followers either. It has nothing to do with follower counts, how many fans you have on LinkedIn. It's really all about how you build relationships online and how your nonprofit and the people that work with your nonprofit can inspire your networks to take action, whether it's fundraising, whether it's signing a petition, changing behavior, whatever that is. It's not about the red hat. So I gave Conant some advice, and he ignored me, and I still have more followers than he does on LinkedIn. So you got to wonder how and why, is this possible? And a lot of you already know this, that we're in the middle of 3 digital revolutions, okay? And this data comes from Pew and the American Life Internet Project. And I'm actually live tweeting my own keynote through Buffer. So if you're following along on the Twitter stream, you'll be seeing links to things I'm talking about. So the first thing is broadband access. 82% of Americans have access to broadband at work or at home. It's not everywhere yet, but it's a lot better than it was 5, 6, 7 years ago. Some of you remember those little modems that used to make that scream, and being on the internet was like watching paint dry, but now we don't have quite that problem anymore. The next thing is we have 89% of Americans have a mobile phone. You know, mobile penetration is nearing 100% in this country. Outside of the US, they're ahead of us. In some countries, there's more than 100% adoption rate of mobile. Do you know why that is? Well, one for the wife, one for the mistress, okay? And of course, what are they doing their mobile phones? A lot of people are accessing social networks, and in the US, we have 81% of Americans are using at least one social network, and can you guess what network that is? Facebook, okay. So what is that making possible? It's making possible cute cat pirates, okay? So let me tell you about Sir Stuffington, the cutest cat pirate you will ever see. And sort of this is in honor of National Cat Day. If any of you know about that, it was yesterday. Lots of cat pictures on the internet. But Sir Stuffington was found with his eye scratched out in an alley outside of Portland, Oregon, along with his 2 sibling kitties. And a teenager found this animal, a teenager that really cared about animal rights and animal adoption and, you know, taking care of animals, took it into the shelter, and then went home and created this Facebook page. And Sir Stuffington became a viral overnight cat sensation. Within 24 hours, they had 36,000 fans, and it got picked up by the local media, and then it got picked up by the national media, and then all of a sudden, supporters started writing checks to go to the shelter. People came in to adopt cats. People came in to volunteer. And all this because a teenager was passionate and reached out to their network and created this. Now, think about it. Some organizations, if they didn't have a presence, if they weren't willing to embrace this openly, this would not be able to happen. You know, this teenager is like the donor of tomorrow and connected and can inspire their network to act. And we saw this summer. You know, how free agents are inspiring people to act, to donate, and it's happening outside of the nonprofit. So for how many of you have heard of the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge? Okay, so for the 99.999% of you who haven't heard about it, it was like a fundraiser for ALS research. You were supposed to donate to ALS and then make a video of yourself dumping cold water on your head and tag some of your friends on Facebook. And of course, it went viral. We saw this. How many of you did it? Great. And did you mention ALS? And did you make a donation? And did people in your network do the same, more or less? Yes. So it actually got started not by ALS, but by a passionate supporter who wanted to see more money being spent and raised on research. And it started in Massachusetts, as you can see, by a guy named Peter Frates, who was in the end stages of ALS. And he was also a baseball player for Boston College. And so he and a friend did this offline fundraiser, and then they got the idea to add the video tagging. And as you can see, it exploded in Massachusetts and went across the country. And they started tagging other sports people, and then whole teams were tagging each other. And from there, it kind of went viral. But it all started because of this free agent, not the development office at ALS, had this idea and used something called social proofing and inspired networks and networks of networks to take action, in this case, donating to ALS. Another thing we saw was that celebrities were spontaneously doing this. Oprah, President Bush, hundreds of celebrities just doing the Ice Bucket Challenge. Now, that's not something that's going to happen every time somebody puts a video on Facebook. But it helped propel this. It helped send it around the world. You had Bollywood actors doing the Ice Bucket Challenge on Facebook, off Facebook. And as you can see, it started to also morph. We had the Soapy Water Ebola Challenge, which was dump a bucket of soapy water on your head to raise awareness about Ebola. We had the Rice Bucket Challenge, which was in India, and it was don't dump the bucket of rice on your head. If you're in India, give a bag of rice to a family who needs it. And so, like everything else on the internet, there was a backlash. Why are you wasting water? Why is one charity getting this? There were rumors circulated about ALS. My favorite quote is that it was a middle-class wet t-shirt contest for armchair slacktivists. They're only clicking, they're not donating, you know. But in fact, they were up to $110 million as of September, just for the American ALS. So I guess the question on everybody's mind is, you know, where's our ice bucket moment? And you'll see in the Twitter stream, I actually did an analysis of what part of the campaign you can replicate and what things you can't, where you need a four-leaf clover. And we're gonna, for those of you coming to the workshop tomorrow, we're gonna be looking at crowdfunding and how to apply some of the lessons. But I think the big takeaway is that all of you working with nonprofits need to become network nonprofits, okay? And so this is the old way of working, okay? You have staff behind the firewall, in their departments, in their silos. You have an institution which is faceless, it's not transparent, and you're reaching in isolation for a goal, okay? So that's the old way of working, and it needs to change to this. And what you're seeing there is the staff behind the firewall, it's on that side, reaching out to their professional networks and, you know, and actually collaborating with each other. You see the logo and the institution becoming more porous, more transparent, and those insiders being able to reach out and work and join up with other individuals, like that teenager in Portland, or other organizations working in networks to solve big, hairy, socially complex problems. That's the change that needs to happen. So to go from something like this to something like that. And it's not as easy as me clicking a button and saying, change. You know, and that's one of the things I think I've learned over the last number of years is that change, especially organizational change, happens slowly. And so, so to become a network nonprofit, you know, it's a simple, agile, and transparent organization and where everybody in the organization is also experts at using their networks, their data, and learning to make the world a better place. So, as I said, it happens slowly. So I had been inspired by this quote from Martin Luther King, and I've taken it into all of my capacity building work. And the quote goes something like this: if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. And if you can't walk, then crawl. But you've got to keep moving forward, one step at a time. So, so I looked at what does it look like to be crawling if you're a network nonprofit? What does it look like to be walking, and what does it look like to be running or flying? So at the crawling stage, you may need some communications developments in your strategy. I hear a lot, we have a communications strategy. Oh, can I read it? No, it's in our heads. So it needs to be kind of written down and more formalized. There's another thing that's needed is the network mindset. And this is really, instead of thinking as a single organization, thinking collaboratively. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. And then there's a need for some culture change. It's a different way of working. It's a little bit more transparent. And for some, that may feel uncomfortable. At the walking stage, organizations are beginning to link their use of social to a specific outcome. And then they're doing lots of small pilots, whether it's one campaign, one program, one channel, and linking it to some results. And also at this point, they're beginning to build incremental capacity, up to 20 hours of staff time per week. Now that's not one half-time position. It could be integrating social into a number of job descriptions. And then there's this chasm that needs to be crossed into running, which is having a robust and formal ladder of engagement. You know exactly how to bring your supporters from distant observers up to being champions for your organization, and what all those stages are in between, and what the metric is for the conversion rate, and using that information to fine-tune your strategy. You need to have a robust content strategy. You need to be telling the stories of your organization, and you need to be optimizing your content for different social channels, and not creating something different for Twitter or something different for Facebook, but taking that core message and that core content and making sure that it's optimized to be shared through your social channels. Having an informal champions program. 6 or 7 years ago when I used to say, everyone in the organization needs to be a champion on social channels for the organization, the audience would gasp. I'd hear, oh, and I'm not hearing gasping so much, but I'm hearing more like, how do we do that? How do you empower your staff or your board or your volunteers to be your champions? And how do you meet new ones that you wouldn't even thought you could meet before, like that teenager from Portland? And how do you empower them to be your champion? Runners also have a way to test different and new technologies that come along. Oh, this thing called Snapchat or Tumblr or whatever, this has come along. Should we have this as part of our communications toolkit? Well, we need to find a way to experiment with this and actually see if it's working for us. So runners have a way to pilot and test and either adopt, scale, or go on to the next thing if it's not working. And then finally, using some measurement and learning in all of this. When you get to the flying stage, this is where you have network building. You have a formal networks that you're a part of. You have a formal champion program, both internally and externally. And you have multi-channel engagement and content, not just social, but it's email, your website is social, it's mobile friendly, you're using mobile, you're using all channels to communicate. And finally, you have an institutionalized process of reflection and continuous improvement, which includes measurement. So if you are, any flyers in the room? Stand up. Anyone flying or teleporting? I was in one country and they said, no, we need teleporting. Okay, running. Stand. Any runners? Jogging? Joggers? Okay, we have some joggers. Great, let's give them a hand. And stand up in the back. Okay, so if you want to know about social, make sure you connect with them. Walkers. Walkers? Okay, great, let's give them a hand. Walking. Okay, just beginning to walk. Table, furniture walking. Nope, crawlers. You can stand, it's okay, crawlers. Because, okay, a crawler is not bad, okay? You have to start somewhere. How many of you have kids? Kids, right, when they crawl, did you say, that's bad? No. So what I've tweeted out is a link to the assessment tool, and you can actually look at 12 different practices that to become a network nonprofit. You can figure out where you are along this continuum and come up with a plan for what you want to improve over the next year. You could take a year. You don't have to do it tomorrow because change happens slowly. The point is getting to the next phase of development. So I want to talk a little bit about one of the harder ones, which is a network mindset. And it's a mindset, okay? It's a way of thinking and a way of being. And most importantly, it's about, leadership through active participation on social. It's also having people, especially the leaders in your organization, as well as staff, being able to balance their personal brand and their professional networks, as well as the organizational brand and organizational networks, all for those in service of the organization's mission, and uses social as well. So, so let's look a little bit of what that might look like on the ground. So one of my favorite examples is Save the Children. How many of you are familiar with them? Okay, so this is their branded Twitter account, okay? And there is the organizational logo and the organizational branding guidelines and the organizational voice and the organizational messaging, and it's nicely translated and tailored for Twitter. And they have almost 1 million followers on Twitter. But they also have their CEO, Carolyn Miles, who's out there on Twitter, her picture, her voice, saying the same things the institutional brand is saying, but it's her. And she will do things like on her mobile phone, she does a lot of site visits and visits children who are benefiting from different programs on the ground, and she'll take photographs. She does a lot of speaking, she does a lot of talking to reporters, and she'll be interacting with them on Twitter. And she's also authentic. She's a human. And she'll talk about taking a walk on the beach, and how it renews her because her work can be really difficult sometimes to see children in that condition. And I think this is the thing that makes some leaders uncomfortable, because in my generation, we were told, it's the institution. It's not you. We even thought that this might be unprofessional for us to do this. But this is how we build trust, because people trust people more than just the logo. And trust is the lubricant of social networks, and it unleashes social capital, which then unleashes donations, people volunteering, and support for your organization. So there's another reason to do this. Now, if you look at this program, it's called Triangulate. All the Twitter programs and software tools begin with TW, and it sounds like you have a list, but it's Triangulate, and I tweeted the link. And you'll see a comparison between Carolyn's account and the organization's account. And this is looking at total reach. This is why I don't do math, but let me try and do this as an algebra problem. Okay, Carolyn Miles, who is the CEO of Save the Children, has almost 8,000 followers on Twitter. But yet her reach, that big pink circle, is at least 4 times the size of the organization's Twitter account, which is that green circle, and they have almost 1 million followers. Why is that? So Carolyn, who is the pink circle, has 7,000 followers, but 4 times the reach compared to the institutional Twitter account, which has almost 1 million followers, but has a much smaller reach. Why? Absolutely, because her target audience are international influencers, people like Bill Gates or the State Department, and they have many more followers. The individuals who are following the brand account are more the grassroots supporters who may have smaller networks on Twitter. So again, both of them, strategy and service of the mission with a presence on social. So this is just a couple of tips, and maybe we'll cover this tomorrow, but I was fortunate enough to be on a panel with Carolyn, and I asked her, and she is of my generation, I said, well, how did you get on Twitter? You know, and I noticed she was wearing glasses. I said, sometimes I can't even read Twitter on my mobile phone, and you're doing this, you know, and she said, well, my marketing director camped outside my door and wouldn't let me leave the office until I sat down with him and he showed me what all this was. I knew about it, I knew I kind of should do it, but I have other important things to do. So he got my attention, and then he did a tweet tutorial. So he sat down, he showed her the basics on Twitter, got it on her phone, and got her started. And the first point of resistance was, I don't have the time to do this. And so he said, use found time. You know, when you're waiting for your plane in the airport, or if you're waiting in line to get your lunch, or if you're on the subway, you know, commuting to work, that's when you can tweet. So all of these things he did to help convince her to get online. And I get asked this question a lot. That's great, but how do I get my CEO to do it? Or how do I get other staff members? It's an incremental process. So the other thing I mentioned is that social media should be a part of everybody's job, okay? And this makes some people really happy and other people not so happy, okay? So let me tell you this story. This is one of my favorite stories. This is about an organization called Upwell. How many of you have heard about them? Upwell? Okay, so they are an organization that works around ocean conservation. And so they're an ocean conservation advocate. And they collaborate with other organizations that want to change policy, but also want to reach out to people and get them to care about ocean conservation. And so, and this is a 3-person organization. It's very small. And they have a person on their staff named Rachel Dearborn, and you can see her there, and she loves sharks. So much she has that shark backpack. And Rachel, they spread out the social media, so all of the staff are doing some part of the social media. And so Rachel could look at shark pictures and tweet about sharks and tweet about shark conservation all day long, but Upwell loves all the fish in the ocean, and Rachel's job social media is just a small part of it. It's not all of her job. So Rachel happened to find this really fantastic blog on Tumblr. And if any of you familiar with Tumblr? Okay, so it's mostly geared towards young people, and there is a collection of blogs on Tumblr that start with F, yeah, whatever the topic is, and that's where people who love a particular topic, the blogger sharing usually photos, visual content around the topic, and they can have lots and lots of followers
commenting, and it's a really great community. So she happened upon F Yeah Sharks, okay? F Yeah Sharks. It had 1 million subscribers. It was a vibrant community of shark lovers. Now, this is an ocean conservation organization with shark conservation as one of its issues. I mean, that's an asset, right? Right? All new supporters. So as Rachel was like participating in the community, she found out that the bloggers who were about to graduate from college decided they didn't want to do the blog anymore. And they wanted to donate it to a nonprofit. So Rachel raised her hand, and they'd like to Upwell. So she went back and talked to her executive director and saying, look, it's 1 million followers, but look at the URL. F Yeah Sharks. Do we want swear words in our URLs associated with our brand and our organization? And so we thought about it, and Rachel said, but 1 million followers who love sharks. And so, okay, so they had the blog donated to Rachel. Actually, she paid for it for the cost of a pepperoni pizza, and they handed over the login to her. And her boss said, okay, you are allowed to service this property as part of your job a couple hours a week. So it was a win-win. They were able to get 1 million people who love sharks and have social be a part of Rachel's job, all in service of the mission. So the question is, how can you leverage your staff's passion for whatever you do on social in service of your mission? How can they become your champions? So of course you need one of these. You need a social media policy. How many of you have a social media policy in place? Great, you need one. You need to protect your organization, and it's not just a piece of paper, okay? It's a living policy. And so there are lots of fantastic resources out there. I suggest the Idealware workbook. There's the social media policy tool, which will give you a first draft. And there's lots of examples from nonprofits. So this will change when you have rules for staff to be your champions. It changes it from being something scary to something happy, to something good. You're supposed to laugh at my emoticon. Okay, and then as part of your policy, you need to have basic do's and don'ts for all staff on social channels. And I love this one. It's from the telecommunications network of the Netherlands, and it's a set of do's and don'ts. Okay, so it's kind of like know the purpose. Do act professional. Do respect other people's points of views. Don't lie. Don't steal other people's content. Don't get into fights. I mean, this is known as like common sense. So, but it's articulating it, and then it gives the guidelines to staff to participate. So you need to have a living social media policy that's not a thou shall not do this, but it's yes, you can do this, and here are some guidelines, and here's why we're doing it, and here are some ways to be effective. So what I'd like to do now is to have you do something called a share pair. Done share pairs before? I imagine you have. A share pair is when you get up and you're going to find someone in the room who you haven't talked to, and I want you to reflect on, how social is your organization? Are you a 1? Are you a 5? Are you a 3? And what do you think you need to move it up a notch? And when you hear me waving and shouting, stop talking, then I want you to stop talking and go back to your seats. Okay? So I want you to get up, find someone in the room to talk about, and reflect on, where's your organization now in terms of being social? Clap 3 times if you can hear me. Clap 3 times if you can hear me. Clap 3 times if you can hear me. Okay, wow, I think we have a record. Great, so you can go back to your seats, and I hope in your conversations, I hope you've discovered some common points of ways to think about this and some things that you can bring, back to your organization. So I've talked about crawl, walk, run, fly, overall, becoming a network nonprofit. I've talked about specifically some internal issues that you need to address to become a network nonprofit. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about becoming data informed, which is a lot of from my second book. And I see you're seeing a joke there. You know this chart we based our past 3 years of strategy on? Call me crazy, but I think it's sideways. Okay, so being data informed is different from being data driven, because you could be data driven and be collecting the data, but it could be the wrong data. But being data informed means you are collecting the data and you're bringing your organizational wisdom to actually making decisions, making changes that get you to better results. So that's being data informed. And so when I was writing this book, I wanted to try and find a case study of being data informed. And I found it in an organization in New York City called DoSomething.org. How many of you are familiar with them? Do Something. They're awesome. So they have a mission of getting up to, I think, 15 million teens active in 2015 in online social good causes, like volunteering in shelters or donating their jeans to kids who need jeans, or a whole array of online campaigns. And what's interesting about this organization is that they have a whole data-informed culture within their organization, and it comes from the top. Now, they're lucky enough to have this guy, Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, who's on their board, and that guy in the middle, he is DJ Patel, and he is the data scientist at LinkedIn. And both of them were on the Do Something board, and they said to Nancy Lublin, who is their CEO, otherwise known as their chief old person, you know, lose your gut. And so she's thinking, lose my gut, okay. In other words, don't make decisions just based on what your gut or what you think might work. Always make it based on what the data tells you. Because again, all of their work is around online campaigns, so they needed to understand conversion rates. What's going to capture these teenagers and get them to see something on Facebook and then walk into a shelter and, you know, adopt a pet or donate supplies or actually do something. So they have a small staff, and they decided that they were going to put 2 data scientists on their staff, and that's Jeffrey and Bob. They were lucky they found 2 PhD biology students who were really passionate about what they wanted to do and brought them on staff. Now, they don't sit in the corner and play with their spreadsheets. They have an open office, and the data scientist's role is to help staff make decisions using data. And so they work with all of the teams on Do Something. Whenever they're planning a campaign, there's a robust spreadsheet behind it. And not filled with data, but the most important data that they need to figure out how to get really great results for that campaign. And so I was kind of following them around in their office, and I said, so what do you think is the most important thing that you tell staff? And they said that the mantra around the office is that we spend 30% of our time collecting the data and 70% of our time making sense and applying the data. So let me give you an example. This is from a campaign they did that was geared towards, this has a little bit of a pet theme here, but you can see I'm a dog person, so I was talking about cats, I had to bring the dogs into it. So this was a campaign that they did where they did some research, and they found that there were a lot of animals that were in kill shelters and that were being euthanized because these shelters did not have websites, they didn't have a Facebook page, they weren't sharing photos and information about the pet adoption on online channels. So they thought this would be a really great project to involve teens in. So they created a Facebook app that was, the intent was to recruit photographers. Okay, so kids could download this app, they could find out where a local shelter was, and they could go into the shelter, take photos of the dogs or the cats, and then share them with their friends and on the internet. So they launched this on the Today Show, and Kathy Lee drops one of the cute puppies that they brought along on its head. Usually Lonnie goes, oh, and then I say, don't worry, no puppies were harmed in the making of this case study. Actually, the puppies were fine, but of course, in this age when everyone has a mobile phone with a video connected to the video camera connected to the internet in their pocket, somebody made a video of Kathy Lee dropping the puppy on its head, made it go in slow motion, made it go backwards, put it onto YouTube, and it got picked up by Gawker. And so the important thing is that they, in the first sentence here, you probably can't read that, in the blog post they said, you know, during a Today Show segment about a Do Something link app that makes pet adoption as easy as smearing fingerprints on your iPhone screen, well, this Do Something link linked right over to their landing page where the app was. And so I happened to be in their office when this happened, and so the data scientists go, all of a sudden they go, excuse us, and they ran off to this room, a transparent conference room in the middle of the office. I loved it, and they actually let me in, and they were sitting there watching the conversion rate in real time. And they weren't just watching it, they were actually discussing whether or not they should use the picture of the dog with the eyes to the right, or should we change the structure of the landing page, or do we need to change the messaging? You know, what are we going to do this next time around to get a better conversion rate of people downloading the app, almost in real time? And right there on a whiteboard, you can't see it, they started the next iteration of the campaign. And so what they have had through this campaign is that it's not just, you know, just promoting it and getting people to download the app. That was the first step. There was a whole pyramid or a whole ladder. They needed to promote the campaign. They needed teenagers to download that app. They needed them to go into the shelter and take photos and share them online. And they needed people then to go in and volunteer at the shelter, or to donate to the shelter, or to adopt pets. And they were able to, through a lot of testing of different creatives, different messaging, and different ways of distributing that, what the metric was for conversion for each one of these steps. So they were able to get their ultimate outcome of getting those pets adopted. So this is what we mean, or what I meant by being data informed, really having a fine-tuned system. Let's see a story from Upwell. Okay, so this is Upwell, and one of the ways that they approach their campaigns is that they do a lot of monitoring on social media channels, and they listen for opportunities where they can insert the conversation about ocean conservation. So, so this is what their monitoring spreadsheet looks like, and each one of those lines are different keywords that are related to different campaigns or issues that they're tracking, like overfishing, whales, and of course sharks. So if you can see it, I'm not sure if you can see it, but you see that really big, tall, pink spike? See it? That's the keyword shark being discussed on different social media channels. So they said, whoa, that's an opportunity. Of all the ambient social media conversations, all of a sudden there's this huge spike of people talking about sharks. Well, what could that be? Shark Week. Yes, it was people tweeting with the hashtag Shark Week. Okay, that's interesting. Let's go in there and analyze, you know, what are they actually saying? Let's do a content analysis of what those tweets are saying. So they found out that we had, you know, a very small percentage in the green were talking about save the sharks. Those were their people. Then they had this other slightly larger group in the red, terror. You know, these are the people who are afraid of sharks. And then all the rest were like, yay, sharks. So there was a huge opportunity for conversion, because people who are already like open to sharks and like them, to convert them to their messaging. So they brought their whole network together, and they worked with many different ocean conservation organizations, and they did a Sharkinar, which was a webinar where they talked about how they could package all of their content about shark conservation, and then package it with the hashtag Shark Week, all with the goal of increasing the conversation about shark conservation on social networks. And so they did that over the course of a couple of weeks, and then they were also able to measure before and after and what the increase was in conversation. So here's another example of being data informed. So I would call those two organizations flyers or teleporters when it came to being data informed, and not all organizations, you know, are there. But if your organization is smaller or just at the beginning stages, you too can learn how to be data informed. So I'm going to leave you with some best practices. So the first one is, and this is in regards to your social, how many of you are measuring your social media? Doing any kind of measurement? Okay, so don't just measure your likes. Don't just measure your followers. I hear a lot of this. That's just the first rung. you really want to build a framework that will show you how you get from that to your ultimate result. You know, how is it helping you move your mission forward? Don't just pull the report together of your reach on Facebook and give it to your executive director because that's what they're asking for. I mean, yeah, you have to do that, but that will not help you improve and get better results with social. It's just the bottom. You need to have some measurement discipline, and this comes from the book. There's different frameworks out there. This is Katie Payne, my co-author's 7 Steps of Measurement, and this will probably look really familiar to a lot of you. You know, you have an objective, you know who the audience is, you figure out how much time it's taking you to do your social media, you have a benchmark, you look at other similar types of nonprofits and what their results are. You come up with a KPI, a key performance metric, or a key metric, one metric that matters, that shows that you're successful. You then pick your data collection tools, and you spend time not only collecting your data, but making sense of it, and then you relate it back to your objective, and the cycle continues. And what happens a lot is that organizations say, oh, they get religion, we're gonna get measurement. But they try to measure the ocean. They try to measure everything. Because they feel to do well in measurement, we have to measure everything. But you don't. You don't. You should start with something small, and something like a campaign that has a start date and an end date, so you can learn to get in the cycle of measuring and learning. I think one of the hard points of measurement is to pick that right data point. You know, the one metric that matters. And the only way that happens is that it comes from conversations. I mean, this is an actual whiteboard from, I think, ACLU of New Jersey, with their team, spending some time talking about what is it that we want to achieve and how does social media actually help us move the needle on this. And it requires maybe a little bit of upfront research, and it requires several iterations. And most important, it requires that KPI that I talked about. Now, I hate that term, KPI. I prefer the KBI, which is the kicking butt indicator, okay? So when you're in the room, when you're talking about it, what piece of data would you need to see in your social that would tell you, hey, we're kicking butt? Or conversely, we're getting our butts kicked. What's that one metric that is really, really important? And go with that. This comes from a fairly small organization, and what they had people who were doing social, they had actually mobile content as well, email, print, if you would, and everybody had their own little spreadsheet and what they thought was the one metric that mattered. So they actually spent some time bringing everybody together and designing the dashboard on the wall. What's the most important thing that we need to show the board? What's the most important thing that senior management needs? And what do we need in our individual departments to do a good job with content development? And so it's sort of going through a process like that can get everybody on the same page to get rid of those data silos. The other thing I hear a lot is, and maybe we wouldn't hear it so much in Pittsburgh with the Bear Center, but we don't have people on staff who have data literacy. We're allergic to spreadsheets. We don't know how to do this. Look to resources. A lot of times, which is really great, a lot of organizations have been going to LinkedIn, of all places, and searching on the LinkedIn profiles for people who have data skills. Because LinkedIn now has this feature that if I'm a profile on LinkedIn, I can signal and say, I have data skills and I want to volunteer for a nonprofit. So I'm seeing lots of, especially smaller nonprofits, sort of gather a data committee to help them with their data collection, cleaning, analyzing, visualizing it, or actually applying it. So don't be, saying we don't have the skills. That you can get the skills. And finally, do you guys know who this is? Who is it? Okay, because last week they told me it was John Wayne. Okay, and what is the famous line from Crocodile Dundee? Okay, say it again. I want you to all say it together. That's not a knife. That's a knife. Okay, gotta say it again together. That's not a knife. That's a knife. Okay? So that's not a spreadsheet. That's a spreadsheet. Okay? You're supposed to laugh. So this is a spreadsheet from Global Giving, and aside from the fact that it matches their logo colors, which I think is pretty cool, you'll notice that it's not just data, that they're looking at their objectives, they have their strategies, and then they have their data from social and from other channels by quarter, and it's all in this great spreadsheet, okay? And so when Allie Carlson's their marketing manager, and I said, Allie, I said, oh my God, what tool did you use to get that? And to create a color-coded, match your logo, have everything in one spreadsheet, beautifully summarized for you. What did you use? And she said, well, because you have to get data from different sources, it's all in an Excel spreadsheet, and I cut and pasted a few things. Some of it was automated, some of it, I had to, actually work with. And I said, ew, doesn't that take you all kinds of time? And that's so boring to cut and paste. Like, ew, why would you do that? And she goes, well, it maybe took me an hour or so to work with the spreadsheet. And you know what? It saves me far more time because I know exactly what techniques are effective and what's not. And so I can actually say, no, we really shouldn't spend our time on that because it doesn't work. Or I can say, wow, this didn't quite work. Let's try something different the next time. So your most important data tool is going to be a spreadsheet. And I know people like throw tomatoes at me when they say that. They think there's some magic tool out there that will be just one button. Tell me if it exists. I really want, does it exist? Push the button, and here's all my social media data beautifully presented to me across all these different systems with all my strategies right there. No. So you need a spreadsheet for that. And then you need to look at it, and then you need to actually make decisions and make changes based on that. So, and that gets to my last point about learning from tracking data. Learn from your past mistakes. You want to have days accident-free at this facility, 0. Okay, so that poor dog has not learned. That poor dog has not been tracking. Does not have a spreadsheet. Has not been considering the results of behavior change. So one of my favorites comes from Moms Rising. How many of you are familiar with them? Okay, so they're a group of mothers who want a more family-friendly place in the U.S., and they do a lot of online campaigns. And what Moms Rising does is because they're working with things like email newsletters and, Tumblr and all kinds of new online tools, they have a set thing at their staff meetings called joyful funerals. Okay, so a joyful funeral is they actually give permission to kill off a strategy. So they might be reflecting, and they do Metrics Monday, so 15 minutes every Monday morning at their staff meeting, they look at the campaign results across different campaigns, and someone might say, is it time for a joyful funeral? And someone says, yes, I think we need to order the flowers for that particular campaign. Yes, it didn't work. You know that Twitter chat you were going to do? It took 30 hours and only 2 people showed up. Let's give that a joyful funeral. And but before they bury the body, they give the technique a eulogy, and usually in that process of reflection, they figure out something that they want to try differently the next time, or they get an idea on how to iterate. So joyful funerals takes the stigma out of something that doesn't work and sort of hits the pause button for people to reflect on how to make something better. I love it. Joyful funeral. Moms Rising. So in summary, success happens by taking the right incremental steps. Scale your organization's social culture with a living social media policy. Allow staff, and I might say board, other volunteers, and other supporters, really allow them to express their personal passion for your mission in service of your strategy and mission. Get some measurement discipline, but start small and go beyond counting your data and learn from it. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions. All right. I also want to say in the TechNow Twitter stream, there should be links to each one of these ideas that I've just shared with you over the last 50 minutes. Questions?
You opened
And you're gonna have to speak up really loud.
You opened up talking about how an organization should focus on how it's inspiring people to act via social media versus the organization's presence. I've seen or heard about nonprofits that actually go out and purchase followers on various social media tools, and build their presence, their credibility. And I'm just wondering, they're willing to pay for that. Do you think that actually, in the long run, is something they should really invest in, or do you think they should spend more time, I guess, segmenting the audience they want and making sure that the followers they have the right followers and that kind of
It's
thing?
more important
Does
to have
that
the
make
right.
any sense?
The numbers don't mean anything. The numbers are BS. Numbers don't matter. It's in fact, on Facebook, fans, the real metric is not the number of fans, but the percentage of fans that are active, that have commented, have liked something. I'd rather have 500 fans that are each going to donate money every time I ask for a cause versus 50,000 who are just going to look at the stream and do nothing.
And you want to segment and focus on those because those that probably
Right.
inspire others.
Right, exactly. And so what you always want to have, especially if you're doing fundraising, but you want to have both your base, the people that you know that love you, that know the most about your organization, that you trust, that trust you, and you want that group to be your champions or your core group. But you also then want to have them work through their networks as well. So you always want to have a core group as part of your target audiences. And you have a built-in target group, which is your staff, your board, your volunteers. I mean, I hear more and more organizations that are, and even organizations with boards who may be older, like me, like coming to a board meeting and showing the Facebook page and giving people sample status updates. And whenever there's information about an event or something important, that the board, as well as staff and as well as other trusted volunteers are sharing that information. It's a built-in asset that you should really leverage. Don't waste your money on buying followers. No.
Preach to the choir. I just wanted to share with a little.
Or tell your boss not to waste money on followers. Okay.
I have a question about how you listen online. That one graph you showed where they were taking keywords and listening and with the
Sure.
spikes and all that. What are the best tools to do that?
Okay, so Upwell, because that was a core part of their mission, to listen and to monitor. They invested in paid software. They didn't go for the free stuff, which can be expensive. So I believe that was Radian 6. So they use a variety of things in addition to Radian 6. But there's also one, if you want to just get started, en.mention.net. I really like it because I used to use Google Alerts, but it's really gone downhill. And this has a whole dashboard, and you can set it up like keyword searches that go through all the social channels. And then you can actually set it up as a dashboard and go into it and reply from it. You can also use Hootsuite. Hootsuite is another. Mention is free unless you get a lot of mentions, and then they start charging you. Mention, en.mention.net. And I'll tweet it out into the Twitter stream. The most important thing other than the tool is to know what keywords that you're searching and to be able to do what's known as Boolean searches so you can narrow it. Like, do you need to search on those terms and narrow it to a specific geographic area? Use a certain term associated with your brand. Another thing is your brand name sucks. Your brand name awesome. Try different configurations to see what's going to get you the right listening stream. What Upwell had done is spent a lot of time configuring exactly the right combination of keywords to get at the information they needed. Was there one back there?
Yeah, I'd like to know how you don't listen. Like, when my biggest problem is that I'm monitoring probably about 20 accounts or so, and I get tired and I get burnt out. Like, how do you, with the volume you deal with, how do you, or when can you shut it off, or do you, or how do you deal with that on a personal level?
Oh, that was the keynote I gave yesterday.
at a social media for nonprofit conference. But the first thing is that, first of all, you have to, I time box all my listening activity because it's a different part of my brain. You need that serendipity, and it's kind of like this. That's the only way I can, it's non-linear, and it doesn't have boundaries. So you could do that all day, but it's not really effective for your brain, and it's not effective if you have to get other work done that requires having an attention span that's longer than a goldfish, which is 9 seconds. Goldfish can concentrate for 9 seconds before shifting to something else. And you probably need more than 9 seconds to write content and to do a strategy. So what I would suggest, what I do is I go in for 3 20-minute dips throughout the day, and I go in and I do as much as I can with that, and then stop. And I give myself, and I do the joy of missing out. I've no longer succumbed to the fear of FOMO, which is the fear of missing out. It's the joy of shutting it down and going to the next task. I've also, because I'm sort of a data geek, and I have one of these, I'm really interested in personal analytics. So, I mean, this is like embarrassing, but I will share it. I've actually tracked like when I have peak concentration, and that kind of task, monitoring, is not a peak concentration task. Writing for me is, and thinking about strategy is, but scanning social isn't, and it makes me distracted. So I do that when I'm like can't concentrate. So I do it as a reward after writing something or a high concentration task. So really think of designing your day and adding in these short time-boxed moments of scanning, if that helps.
So what happens when the phone rings? Like I have a really great idea of how I'm going to plan my day, and the first hour is going to be this, and the next hour is going to be this, and then the phone rings and something's on fire. So how do you go back to that structure?
Okay, two ways. Well, okay, so the first thing I do is I have something in my calendar called green time, and I can't always have it when I'm traveling, but I actually block out time in my calendar that's color-coded green. It's called green time, and that's my quiet reading time. I don't schedule any meetings, and I will actually put the phone in the other room because they can wait for an hour. And they can wait for an hour. I mean, it's unless you're in the medical emergency field or you work at a fire station, I mean, and you can't ignore the phone, but don't do that. So I do that. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I hear the phone like buzzing in the next room, and of course it's like, oh, I got to go get to the phone, and then I make the mistake of answering the phone, and so then to go back, I take a walk. I take a 10-minute walk, and if you move around and take a 10 or 15-minute walk, you'll reboot your brain, and the endorphins will flow, and you'll get back to your quiet time. So that's why I do it. We're gonna get Jeff some exercise.
That's right, I'm on. You talked about using the passion of your staff. We have staff who has passion for other things not related to us, controversial things related to politics and religion, and all sorts of things. And we try to tell them they're kind of on duty 24/7, and what they put on their personal Facebook kind of reflects back on us, but it's really hard to stifle that.
Okay, so so if there are certain controversial political things, there are certain guidelines that nonprofits and foundations, I don't know if you're with a philanthropy or a nonprofit, that you don't want to lose your tax status because staff is doing something that could, if it was reported to the IRS, you could get in trouble if they were to act. So you can't be, you can't engage in partisan politics, and it can't be perceived as being lobbying if you're a nonprofit. So, and I actually tweeted out a link to an organization called Boulder Advocacy that describes exactly what the guidelines are, in terms of staff. So what we're saying in terms of your staff being champions for your organization, we're not telling them to just go out there and do anything and see what happens. You're actually laying out what the guidelines are, and you're actually giving them some training around the guidelines, and you're trusting them. People do make mistakes, and then you would have to point out what the mistakes are, and if they go, oh my God, I'm so sorry I made a mistake, you give them a second chance.
Or if they just said, well, that's too bad, then you kind of know the answer of where, of their fact from learning from a mistake.
We had a staff person running for city council.
Pardon?
We had a staff person running for city council.
So that I would talk to your lawyer about. You know?
Okay. Well, I mean, not on company time.
Yeah, but then that definitely probably should not be a part of their job. And they should not be, if they are running for a political office, they should not be signing up for a social media account with your nonprofit email. They should not be tweeting their campaign stuff on your nonprofit Twitter account or posting it onto your Facebook page. And they probably should have on their personal identities, they should probably have some sort of disclaimer that says, these views are my personal account, blah, blah, blah. Not the views of the organization. So with a situation like that, that's probably different than, a typical nonprofit. So you'd want to be really careful about that line. Make sense?
Do you have any kind of general guidelines for how often you should be updating? Say something like Facebook, you always see those people on Facebook who are really annoying and update every 5 seconds. So for an organization, should you be updating like once a week, once a day? Is there a kind of a general guideline for how much people pay attention?
Okay, so you're talking about the brand page?
Yeah.
Okay, so in your, are you familiar with Facebook Insights, the metrics program?
A little bit, not a lot.
Okay, so first of all, you should be downloading a spreadsheet that's showing you by post what the reach is and what the engagement index is, so you can actually look at that once a month and say, the posts on these topics using this kind of content are doing really well, we want to run more of that. Then, once you got that under your belt, the next level up you can go, there is a hide rate and an unsubscribe rate, which is people hiding your posts because you're posting too often or they don't like your content. And then what you want to do is look at that based on the kinds of posts and your frequency. And then you'll be able to say, gee, when we post 5 times a week, once a day during the weekdays, that you get a much lower hide and unsubscribe rate when we're posting, 15 times a week, which seems to be too much because people are hiding us.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's no general guideline because it depends on your audience. So that's why you really need to be looking at your metrics.
Okay.
Yep.
Real quick to clarify.
You're gonna have to speak up because I can't hear you.
Just real quick to clarify and expand on what he was asking about. If you do have staff that sign up for social media, whether it be Facebook or Twitter, and they use your corporate email, their corporate email address, does that put you, I'm a nonprofit, does that put you in some kind of liability or compliance issue if they didn't sign a policy of some sort or anything like that? Or?
It could potentially. You should ask your lawyer about that. But if you're going to have staff being your champions, right, and have a persona that is going to be about them, being authentically them, but also about the work they do for your nonprofit, and that account is going to be associated with your nonprofit, then you need to have a good social media policy in place. And part of that, they can't be tweeting partisan politics or appear-to-be lobbying, because those are IRS guidelines. So, so what has happened, I think, is that some organizations have been slow to catch up, and meanwhile the staff has already set up profiles, without the right email address or whatever. There hasn't been the education and the training or the monitoring of the policy in place. So, I mean, do you have a policy in place?
We do, but I don't know that it goes into that extent of detail. I mean, we have a lot of staff and they just use that email because it was what they really had when they signed up for Facebook. That's commonly the answer I got back, but I hadn't known that there was like a liability into that conversation.
Right, so what you should do is, I tweeted out a link to my, it's on my wiki, and it's a complete collection of social media policy, and it takes you through the different workbooks, there are different examples, and as you go further down, you'll find boulderadvocacy.org. They're an organization that's in DC, and they have the definitive guide on the IRS guidelines, social media, and nonprofit advocacy. And it's a really clear, non-lawyerly language. And there's also a 2-page cheat sheet. And even better, the link that it takes you to goes to their organizational page, and there's a phone number that you can actually call up and talk to their lawyers. you know,
One more question for Beth. I see you, I'm coming.
Do you have any tips or advice on how to get your staff, particularly your CEO, your board members, on board with social media, to get them to actually tweet and talk about your agency? And like our staff members, just they don't want to get involved with that whatsoever. So that pretty much leaves everything on my shoulders. We have people going out to conferences, we have people performing outreach programs, classes. They refuse to tweet about it, to take pictures, to do any sort of like social media involvement around this. Do you have any tips or advice to get?
where's your executive director or people who are leaders in your organization? Where are they on this? Are they?
They don't want it either. They're kind of old-fashioned. They don't see the benefits in social media.
So
They're just not on board with it at all.
Okay, so what I would call them, I would categorize that is that you have your culture is in the pre-contemplation stages. So if you think about, I've just learned this from guest teaching at University of Buffalo Social Work School. I learned about how social workers work with their addiction clients. You know, if somebody's addicted to something, and they need to stop drinking or they need to get off heroin or whatever. You have the pre-contemplation stage, you have the contemplation stage, you have the active trying stage, and then you have the maintenance stage. So if they're really resistant to it, they're in the pre-contemplation stage. And the only thing, if you confront them head on, they're going to resist even further. So you have to use the thing about how might we, or would it be possible for us to consider this? Or you also have to find, if you can, other examples of other nonprofits and other CEOs or leaders in your field who are already doing it. And I actually have a list, and I think I tweeted it out, is the ultimate nonprofit CEO Twitter list. It has several thousand Twitter accounts that are run by CEOs of nonprofits. So you can look through it and find maybe an organization that's similar to yours. And you can just do some education. And then you may be able to move to the contemplation stage, which is, let's try a small experiment of something that's low risk. And so maybe it's saying, well, why don't you just, now that we found several of your colleagues in the field of XYZ on Twitter who are active, why don't you just try tweeting something that you've read that relates to the field and see if that returns value. And then it's a matter then of getting them to regularly tweet. So it's a slow process. And sometimes some people get so frustrated, they find another organization that's already in the active experimental stage and say, okay, I now know what an organization that's in the pre-contemplation stage is like, and I'm going to go work for an organization that's in the active use stage.
All right, well, everybody, thank you, Beth. Thank you.